us. Welcome to episode 2 of Skate Through the Bible in 30 minutes or less. So last episode we gave you a basic overview of the entire Bible, how many books there were and all that. So we're going to jump right into the rest of the Bible. The book of Genesis talks about creation. You may have heard of Adam and Eve. Basically, it starts out, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was without form or void. So basically God made all the planets, all the stars, all the sky, this planet, all the other planets. If there's any aliens on all those planets, he made those too. That's a whole different discussion we may or may not get into later. But he made everything. And so in the story of creation, he makes the earth, he makes the plants and the animals and the bugs and the fish and the dogs and the cats and the mooses and the platypuses and everything else. And then he looks at that and goes, yep, that's pretty cool. And then he makes man. And he goes, yeah, I'm going to make man. So he makes Adam. Adam's the first dude. And he says, okay, Adam, your first job is you're going to name all these animals. That must have taken a while. I don't know how long it took, but he's like naming all the animals and whatnot. And then it says that God looked down and saw that it was not good for Adam to be alone. So he's going to make him a helpmate. So it says that God put Adam to sleep, yanked out one of his ribs, and made Eve out of that. Now, some people are like, oh, was that a metaphor? Oh, maybe. Or was it literal? Did he literally do that? Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't there, and neither were you. I don't know. A lot of this is unanswerable. I'm just telling you what it says. So he makes Eve, and that's a helpmate for Adam. And then it goes into the whole, they were in the Garden of Eden, and God said, you may eat of any tree in this garden, but do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now again, was it a literal tree or was it a figurative tree? I don't know. It might have been a literal tree. Maybe they literally went and ate from a tree, or maybe it was some other thing that they weren't supposed to do. The basic gist of it is God said, don't do this one thing, and they went ahead and did it. And the reason I think part of this might be metaphoric is because it says that a serpent came up and started talking to Eve, and I'm like, well, I don't know, serpents don't really talk. It's not really possible for them to talk. They don't have vocal cords. So maybe it was metaphoric. Or maybe a serpent really did talk. I don't know. Again, I wasn't there. So anyway, Eve eats of said fruit, and she doesn't die. And then Adam comes back along and says, hey, I ate of this fruit. It's really good. You should have some. And I didn't die. So then Adam eats of it. And so that's the fall. That's the fall of man. That's the first sin. God said, don't do this thing. And whether it was a literal piece of fruit or something else, we don't know. But God said, don't do this, and he did. So there was the fall of man. That's where sin enters the world. And so God comes down. He's like, hey, where are you guys at? And they're trying to hide. Get away from God. So God's like, what happened? So then they fess up. He's like, okay. So this is the first sacrifice. God goes and sacrifices an animal to forgive their sin and then clothes them, because he's like, why are you hiding from me? And they're like, well, because we're naked. Well, who told you were naked? Like, you were okay with being naked earlier. Now all of a sudden you're ashamed. So anyway, God makes them garments, and so they cover themselves. And he says, go ye therefore and multiply. So they have a bunch of kids. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens. We'll go through that later when we're going through the books of the Bible. But so we're going to fast forward. They have a bunch of kids. They pass away. There's several generations that transpire. And then several generations later, God looks down and goes, man, look at this. What a mess. There's nothing but raping and killing going on down there. Everybody's just killing and raping and stealing, and it's just madness. Oh, this is terrible. I should shake it up like I just got to start over. Except that guy, Noah. Noah, you're pretty cool. Now you got to keep in mind, there's no 10 Commandments yet. There's no rules really set up yet. But it's intrinsic in all of our hearts that there is a God. And so even before there was a Bible written, even before there was 10 Commandments or any law written or anything, people did know that, yeah, no, there's a God, and I'm going to worship this God. And Noah was one of those guys. And so God says, hey, Noah, you're a righteous, upstanding man, and everybody else sucks because they're running around raping and killing and murdering everybody. So tell you what, I'm going to smoke this place. I'm going to flood it out. So I want you to make this big old boat. And it gives them the schematics. It needs to be this long by that long and this wide, yada, yada, yada. And it's going to be covered with such and such and make it waterproof and all this stuff. And so he starts building this boat. He's obedient to God. And the people around him were mocking him, thinking, "You're an idiot. What are you doing, idiot?" And he's like, I'm going to build this big old boat. God told me to build a boat. So, and he doesn't do this in a weekend. It takes him a long time to do this. So he builds this big boat. And then a lot of people think, oh, then Noah had to go out and get 2 of every animal. No, he didn't. God did, actually. He just built a boat. God brought 2 of every animal into the boat. And then when he was done, everybody got in the boat. And God shut the door in the boat. That's what the Bible says. And then he flooded the place, completely drenched the entire world. Was it a local flood or a global flood? Again, I don't know. I wasn't there. Some people say it was local. Some people say it was global. I think it was global because there's a lot of archaeological proof that says that it was global. And we'll go into that later in subsequent episodes. But I believe it was a global flood. And so 40 days, 40 nights it rains. And then finally the ark lands on the top of Mount Ararat is what the Bible says. And so the water subsides, they get out, and they start over. And they're creating the rest of mankind. All right, so then Noah and his family began repopulating the earth. Several generations transpire, and then enter this one dude named Abram and his old lady Sarai. And so they're old. And God comes to Abram and says, "Hey, dude, you're going to be the father of many nations. You're going to have kids, and your descendants will be like as many as grains of sand on the seashore." And he kind of goes, "Dude, God, really? Like, I'm old, and my old lady's old, and she's all like, barren. We can't have kids." And he's like, "I'm God. Like, believe me, this is what we're going to do." And so Abram goes, talks to Sarai at home and says, "Hey, God says we're going to have a kid." And she laughs. And she's like, "No, we can't do that. I'm barren and you're old, so that's not going to happen." And he's like, "Yeah, that's pretty much what God said we're going to do, and I believe God." So she's like, "All right, well, if that's what you think, then why don't you go ahead and hook up with my handmaiden, Omer? She's over there. I'll go have a kid with her." And it probably wasn't the wisest thing, but then Abram's like, "Oh, my wife wants me to go hook up with some hot young handmaiden. Okay, well, I'm going to go do that." So he does. And she gets pregnant, and she has a kid. And his name is Ishmael. And there was some jealousy involved later on, and Ishmael and Homer took off. I have a whole lot more I could say about that. Maybe I'll talk about that later in other episodes. There's a whole lot that happened involving that, but for the sake of brevity, we're going to move on. So finally, Abram does hook up with Sarai, and they do get pregnant, and Sarai has twins. And Abram, so sometimes in the Bible, God will change people's names. Like, "You're so cool, I'm going to change your name." So he changed Abram's name to Abraham, and he changed Sarai's name to Sarah. So Abraham and Sarah, excuse me, have twins, Esau and Isaac. And so some other stuff happens, which we'll get into later. Then Isaac, him and his wife give birth to Jacob, and Jacob is so cool. God says, "Hey, I'm going to change your name to Israel." That's where the name Israel comes from. The country of Israel, the nation of Israel, the children of Israel. That's him right there, Jacob. God changed his name to Israel. So this dude has 12 sons. And if you've ever heard of like the 12 tribes of Israel, that's where these 12 tribes come from. And so we're coming up on the 10-minute mark, and as promised, I was going to keep all these episodes 10 minutes or less. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about Israel's 12 sons. Stay tuned. Peace out. Hey, if you'd like to drop me an email, you can email me at bibleskate@yahoo.com. That's the word Bible, SK8, @yahoo.com. Ask me a question, suggest a topic, or tell me I suck, whatever you want to do. Anyway, bibleskate@yahoo.com. All right?